Good morning. Okay, How to Train Your Dragon, How to Speak Dragonese, Chapter 11, the Bog Burglar Heir. Okay, so Hiccup and Fishlegs are in Fort Sinister, the big German fort, and they've been thrown into a dungeon. The Gronkel trotted into the room. It was a large, bare space with a table and a few chairs and some straw in the corner that served for beds. The windows were barred. The boys were clearly not going to have the same luxuries the Romans gave themselves. The Gronkel dropped Fishlegs and Hiccup on the floor and backed out of the room. "Making yourselves at home," sneered the first kidnapper, and the door clanged shut. Standing in the middle of the room was a small girl with blonde hair and a ferocious expression. The girl drew her sword with a flourish. "Who are you? What are your names?" she demanded fiercely. "Who sent you? Where'd you come from?" My name is Hiccup," stammered Hiccup. "And this is Fishlegs. We're hooligans." "I don't believe you," yelled the little girl. "You're Roman spies. Draw your swords and fight like men, you Latin lowlives." The boys looked at the furious little girl in amazement. Fishlegs began to laugh. There she is. Sorry. He wasn't laughing 2 seconds later when the little girl cut the cord of his trousers and they fell down around his ankles. "Hey," objected Fishlegs, indignantly hauling them up again. "Watch what you're doing with that sword." In reply, the little girl hoisted the sword over her head and ran towards Hiccup, shouting the Bog Burglar war cry, which sounds like a very rude word, shouted at the top of the lungs. Hiccup drew his sword just in time to parry, which means to block. In sword fighting, when your sword hits your opponent's sword to block it, it's called a parry. Hiccup drew his sword just in time to parry her lunge. Lunge is when you try and stick somebody with your sword, try and poke it into them, that you lunge at them. And they began to fight. Last year, Hiccup had found out that he was left-handed. Since then, he discovered he had a gift for sword fighting. It was the only thing on the pirate training program that he was truly good at. He could beat even Oikish and Dog's Breath quite easily and was having extra lessons with Gormless the Grim, who was the best sword fighter in the hooligan tribe. But this little girl was just as good at sword fighting as Hiccup. Her arm moved so quickly you could hardly see it. She turned cartwheels between moves, and she talked constantly throughout, which made it difficult to concentrate. "Fight, you nano-eating, locust-baking, toga-wearing Jupiter worshipper. Oh, you're actually quite good at this, for a boy. I've been getting so bored you have no idea." "Can't we just have a quiet talk about this?" asked Hiccup breathlessly. "There really is no need for us to be fighting." But the little girl took absolutely no notice of him and carried on talking. "I see you know the Grimbeard's grapple, and the flash-cut lunge, and the death-watch parry, and the—" "Will you stop?" panted Hiccup, frantically parrying all these moves and getting his sleeve cut off in the process. "My name really is Hiccup. I really am a hooligan." "I don't believe you," said the little girl. "You're a Roman spy. Admit it, or I will unzip you from your breadbasket to your oyster gobbler." Your breadbasket is another term for your stomach. And oyster gobbler, I guess, is your mouth. So she's talking about cutting him from his stomach to his mouth with her sword. But she's saying, unzip. "Oh, your defense is a bit weak, you know. You should really work on that. Otherwise, a person could just nip through." And she made a perfectly executed lunge, which Hiccup parried at the last moment, but which cut off his second sleeve. "Whoops," crowed the little girl joyfully. "There goes the other one." "I am not a Roman," gasped Hiccup, his back against the wall. "Well, a hooligan isn't much better," said the little girl, pausing for a second and then carrying on. "My mother says the only good hooligan is a dead hooligan." That's funny, panted Hiccup, because my father says that the only good bog burglar is a dead bog burglar, and the really amusing thing is, unless we join together in about 2 weeks' time, we are both going to be very good and very dead. Oh, bother, sighed the girl, stopping at last. Now that she wasn't moving around so much, Hiccup could see that she was really quite a small girl, at least a head shorter than he was. I was really looking forward to spilling some blood. She grinned at Hiccup. You're not a bad sword fighter, actually, for a boy. Thanks, said Hiccup, still trying to catch his breath. The little girl stuck out her hand for a handshake. My name's Kamikaze, the heir to the bog burglars. Nice to meet you. What are you doing here, anyway? Well, we got kidnapped just like you, replied Hiccup. And we're also looking for a dragon that I've lost. He's about so high, green eyes, a communal garden. Oh yes, said Kamikaze. The soldier who brings the food told me about him. He bit the prefect on the nose when they brought him in. Good old Toothless, said Hiccup. The prefect really doesn't like him, said Kamikaze. Yeah, I know, said Hiccup. Toothless once did a poo in his helmet, and a treacherous never forgives. They've put him in level 7, top security. Oh, poor Toothless, said Hiccup. I can't bear to think of him being trapped. He hates small spaces. He can't even go down rabbit holes, despite rabbit being his favourite food. He stays at the entrance, shrieking his head off. But at that very moment, the door to the prison cell opened again. It was a stout soldier carrying a small green ball in one hand. I've got a present for Hiccup, Horrendous Haddock III from the prefect, leered the soldier. He threw the ball roughly at Hiccup, and it struck him heavily in the stomach, winding him severely. The little ball unrolled itself with a furious, "Did you mind?" And with a sudden burst of happiness, Hiccup realised who it was. Toothless! He exclaimed joyfully, once he'd got his breath back. Toothless! Interesting that the prefect has decided to give him Toothless back, isn't it? The prefect being Alvin the Treacherous. He bent down to pick up his dragon. The poor little animal had lost so much weight, he was all skin and bones. Hiccup could feel his ribs sticking out, and his tail had gone all floppy and lost its pointy fork, which is what happens if a dragon is imprisoned or deeply unhappy. For a moment, Toothless pretended that he didn't care. Yucky, put me down. And then he put his little dragon arms around Hiccup's neck and hung on for dear life, whispering in Hiccup's ear so that only he could hear over and over again. Thank you. Toothless would have died if he spent one more hour in that horrible place. Thank you. I'm not sure Toothless realises he's still imprisoned, but better to be imprisoned with Hiccup. Chapter 12, The Master Escaper. It may not sound like much, but one of the first facts you learn about dragons is that they are hardly ever grateful. This was the first time in Toothless's life he had thanked Hiccup for anything. He soon recovered himself, and to make up for this moment of weakness, he gave Hiccup an embarrassed nip on the ear. He then became thoroughly overexcited and twirled himself around Hiccup's neck 3 times, before diving down Hiccup's shirt and running all over his chest and around his back and under his armpits, which made Hiccup laugh a lot because the light pattering of a dragon's feet and the swirl of its tail is almost unbearably ticklish. Stop it! Shouted Hiccup in between gasps of laughter. Toothless emerged from the shirt and scurried onto Hiccup's head, his little green paws making Hiccup's hair stand up on end, even more than it did already. Sitting high up on Hiccup's forehead, Toothless puffed out his chest and crowed 3 joyful cock-a-doodle-doos of triumph. Kamikaze watched all of this with interest, particularly the strange pops and whistles that Hiccup made with his mouth when talking back to Toothless in Dragonese. "Oh, I've heard about you," she said. You're the geek who talks to dragons. Talking to dragons is not geeky, said Hiccup crossly. Dragon whispering is an ancient and rare skill. Okay, said Fishlegs, so we've rescued Toothless. I have just one question. Who's going to rescue us? We're going to rescue ourselves, of course, cried Kamikaze, and drawing her sword again. We escape or we die, she shouted with a mad gleam in her eye. As it happens, I am the master escaper. This isn't the first time I've been kidnapped, you know. The master escaper, snorted Fishlegs. You bog burglars are very pleased with yourselves. So who's kidnapped you before? Oh, other Viking tribes, mostly, replied Kamikaze carelessly. She hummed a little tune and happily swung her sword round her head. The meatheads? The visit hugs? Us burglars, bog burglars, are always quarrelling with everybody. We have anger issues. Anyway, I escaped from the visit hugs. No problem. No problem, said Fishlegs. The visit hugs were supposed to be tough. I think you'll have a problem escaping from a Roman fortress, said Hiccup, stroking Toothless, who was beginning to purr. Roman fortresses are built to be impossible to get into and impossible to get out of. Have you noticed the 4 perimeter fences? The 4 observation balloons? The guards at every watchtower? Not to mention the bars on this cell and the locked door. I don't think you've got a hope of escaping. End of part 1.